Okay, we'll get started because we know this is coming into the lunchtime hour. So good afternoon and welcome to AMGC's first virtual In Conversation With webinar series. My name is Charmaine Phillips and I'm the director here in the Northern Territory for AMGC. I'd like to begin today with an acknowledgement to country. So in the spirit of reconciliation, AMGC acknowledges the traditional custodians of country throughout Australia and their connections to land, sea and community. We pay our respects to their elders past and present and extend that respect to all Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islanders people joining us online today. So thank you for taking your time out of your day to join us in the conversations. This series of 30-minute webinars have been designed to give local manufacturers information on national bodies that are available to support and assist them with their manufacturing endeavours. However, if you are joining us from outside the Territory, welcome, and I'm sure you will also get a lot from the information shared through our conversation. Today, I have with me Navin Chandrasekaran. He's the Client Engagement Facilitator at the Australian National Fabrication Facility. Navin and I will chat for about 20 minutes with 5 to 10 minutes left at the end of the session for open questions. So you have all been put on mute, so please use the Q&A function at the top of your screen to send your questions through as we talk, and then we'll take you off mute at the end so we can have some discussions as a group. So let's get started. Navin, today's webinar aims to give our audience insight into the Australian National Fabrication Facility, or ANFF for short. Some people may know about you, some people may not. So can you start by introducing us to the ANFF? How long has it been around and why was it established?
Yeah, it's fairly long name. Australian National Fabrication Facility, sometimes referred to as ANF or ANFF. Basically, we are here as a R&D infrastructure to support micro and nano fabrication, but I'll jump into it a bit later. Backstory in terms of how we were established. So ANFF has been around since 2007, and it has been established under the NCRIS strategy. So you'll see a logo on top of my head, which is part of the Commonwealth Department of Education's initiative to provide open access facility to anyone in Australia willing to conduct research, irrespective of whether they're from academia, industry, or an individual with an idea that's trying to transform an idea to a product. So that's basically the idea of ANF, and we are located across the country in 8 nodes, and the idea is to support manufacturing in different sectors. Sometimes it's interdisciplinary, so we work across the network to see how we can best support the R&D and commercialization activities.
Great. And so in what ways specifically can ANFF support Australian manufacturers?
So really it's, like I said, it's a network of facilities, and we've got more than 500 pieces of equipment. Some of them are highly complex laser systems or lithography systems and those type of things. And you also have equipments that support 3D printing and additive manufacturing. So it really it comes down to miniaturization of devices, and as the modern technology progresses into Internet of Things and those type of things, there's a requirement that there's a lot of sensors that's required. There's a lot of miniaturized products that's required, that needs to interact with either the human body or with the environment or measurement and those type of things. So where anything needs to be miniaturized, that's really where we come in, and also kind of develop a product as a whole, really in the early TRL levels from 1 to 5. Okay. But also, I think broadly classifying, kind of say, because sometimes micro and nano fabrication can be a bit overwhelming for a lot of manufacturers. It's basically deposition, etching, and really putting pieces together. So at a micro and nano level, you're trying to add layer by layer, sometimes at an atomic level, if you're using quantum computing as an example. So it needs to be dealt with at an atomic level. But think of examples like microneedles, you're actually adding layer by layer but actually confining them to a particular structure at the nano scale. So that's really what we tend to do with the systems. Yeah.
And is this a facility that can be used as on a project by project basis if industry was to engage with ANFF?
Yeah, so it's really a case by case. So the way users can access the facility is, like I mentioned, it's an open access facility. Sometimes we provide access to the facility to the user, get the user trained on the equipment, depending on the complexity of the project. Sometimes if the user thinks they need to use the tool to design the product over a long period of time, it might be worthwhile gaining access if they're locally located to the facility as well. And in instances where they may not be able to access the facility, we've got more than 130 experts who actually are well trained on the equipment. So they're more than happy to follow protocols on the behalf of the user and provide the outcome to them. So those are the two main modes of access. Yeah, I think mostly the projects are dealt on a case-by-case basis, and each of the hubs will have facility managers that would work closely with them to design the scope of the project. And also one of those things I'd like to mention at this point is because we are in the R&D space and we act as a R&D infrastructure support, we don't necessarily contribute to the creation of the idea, but we help in the execution of the idea. So the creation of the idea and designing the experiment and all of that rests with the user. Otherwise, it would lead in a situation where we would be creating the intellectual property. So one of the main things is that we do not really interfere with the user's intellectual property. So we call ourselves IP neutral. So right. If you come in with an idea, you walk out with your idea and with the product. So there's no influence from our end.
And that's great for, I guess, industry and manufacturers to know, because the R&D and the testing and the use of this equipment could be quite a big capital investment for a business through that commercialization path. So knowing that they've got access to a facility such as yours to use on that project by project or case by case basis is quite enticing for, I guess, manufacturers to really look into that R&D phase of their manufacturing.
Yeah.
So you mentioned TRL levels or technical readiness levels earlier. So for those that have just joined us, you are on mute until the end. So please capture any questions and we'll take you all off mute for a discussion at the end. And it is being recorded. So if you've missed anything, you can go back and have a look. So TRLs are a type of measurement system used to assess the maturity level of a particular technology, correct? So we, AMGC, use this system to determine project readiness within our Advanced Manufacturing Ecosystem Fund and all our commercialisation funds. So can you tell me, how does ANFF align its services to the TRL measurement system?
So there's actually a graph which I don't have, but it's in one of our casebooks, which I'm happy to share later on. But basically, to cover the TRL levels, the graph goes like between TRL 2 to 5 is where the peak is. So the early TRL 1 is where the idea stage is, and it's really up to the user to define what exactly they want to do. But when it comes to developing their first prototype or MVP, that's something that we can start supporting. And all of the equipments are mostly on an industrial grade. So if you design a prototype and you design a minimum viable product, you're pretty much ready to start selling. So and we're looking into higher TRL levels, but the limitation comes in where effectively, if a user has created a prototype on a particular equipment, it means that if they continue to use that equipment, it restricts access to other users. So which is kind of really why we don't really say we are positioned for mass manufacturing. But really, we get to a stage where we can help the user with a minimum viable product. And again, sometimes it depends case by case, and what the quantities are depending on products. Some businesses require small parts, but they need it in thousands and 10,000s. Whereas for other industries, 100 units are mass manufacturing for them. So it's really context based as well. But to answer your question around TRL levels, I think really we specialize in the 3 and 4s where you need constant reiteration of a prototype. And that's where we specialize in.
Great. So that's music to our ears at AMGC, because here in the territory we do have our AMEF fund, which is the Advanced Manufacturing Ecosystem Fund, and we do support those early phase projects, which are between a TRL 3 and 5 or 6. So it'd be a great collaboration partner for any businesses that are in that area of R&D that they're looking for.
Okay, that's actually new to me. What was the funding? Is that from AMGC?
Yep, so I'll jump onto that towards the end.
Okay. Yeah, okay.
Yeah. So going back to the graph behind you and the nodes, you say that these are in every state and territory. Can you just talk me through what these are and just some of the examples of some of the micro and nano fabrication related tools that ANFF provides access to?
Yeah. So we've got 8 nodes and 21 hubs. The node classification is really based on the niche capability that they're offering. Mostly the nodes are named after the state that they're based in. So the only states that we don't have a node is in Northern Territory and Tasmania, but we're a national organization, so we sometimes support interstate clients as well. Like even a client from Queensland can get support from Sydney and things like that. So it's really a network that talks to each other within the network. There's ANFF materials node, which is shared between Wollongong and Newcastle. What that really does is demonstrate the use cases for novel material, like for example, use of graphene or use of roll-to-roll printing that can use organoelectronics. So basically, the roll-to-roll printing can do a mass-scale electronic sensors or flexible electronics or flexible solar cells and those type of capabilities. So it's really anything to do with materials come under those hubs between Wollongong and Newcastle. If they have to do 3D metal printing for, let's say, if they're creating a electrode for hydrogen production. So that's something, one of those projects in Wollongong. And 3D bioprinting, where they can print cells that can become organs or organoids or laboratory on a plate, and those type of projects can also be done at ANFF Materials. And I think they're striving to become a ISO certified facility as well. So which becomes when a user starts actually using the facility, they can be confident that the product that comes out of the facility can actually go through the regulatory process and those sorts of things. Examples of other nodes are really this ANFF Queensland and New South Wales, Victoria. And Victoria is where we've got the standalone facility, which is the Melbourne Centre for Nano Fabrication. Yep. And you'll also see on this side, we've got all these logos, pretty much the host institutions where the facility is located. One of those things I failed to mention was that although we get the funding from the Commonwealth government, we're also co-funded by respective state governments and the host institutions to establish those hubs. And each of the hubs are managed by or have a director who's strong in their technical background, and they drive the research in that area. The New South Wales hubs really specialize in photovoltaics, silicon fabrication, quantum computing chips, semiconductors, and those type of things. Whereas Queensland really specializes in, they all have clean room facilities. That's like the basic requirement for some of those processes. And sometimes we do provide access to clean room if the user wishes to carry out their own processes, which is assessed on a case-by-case basis. But really, Queensland sometimes specializes in 3D nano printing. So micro needles, for example, Waxis produces their needle-free vaccine patches. So the early development has occurred between, I think, Melbourne and Queensland hubs. And Deakin Uni, the hub at Deakin Uni specializes in fabrics and those type of things. The hub at Western Australia, they specialize in microelectronic devices and MEMS type of sensors. semiconductors, infrared sensors, and those type of things. And also we closely work with some of the defense partners who have ongoing projects for their own applications. So there's this really wide range of sectors that we support, and the hub really specializes depending on the type of capability that they have. But in most cases, if you talk to one particular hub and there's a capability that's lacking, we often talk to another hub to see how we can manage the project internally. And sometimes there's testing and validation that's required as well. So those are the things that we can do. Examples would be polymer validation. If there's the type of plastics that we want to understand, quality control. Sometimes in polycarbonate, you want to understand what the transparency is looking like, what the purity of the material is, if there's complaints from customers, how we can support those type of things. So those are the type of things. So I think there's no project that's less complex or too complex. So it's really, we're going through this process where how can we best support R&D and businesses. So that's really the approach we're taking.
That's fascinating. So I guess the extent of the capabilities and expertise that industry has access to through all of your nodes is really encouraging, because, you know, as we know, manufacturing is a capability across many sectors, and being competitive in manufacturing is really introducing that R&D piece. So that's great to know, Naveen. Your role is client engagement facilitator. So tell me a little bit about what your role is within ANFF and how interested manufacturers can get in touch with either yourself or someone else who may be relevant.
Yeah. So as you mentioned, my role is a client engagement facilitator. I'm based in Sydney and kind of interact with the New South Wales and ACT nodes. And there are two other colleagues who are based out of Adelaide and Melbourne, respectively. And among the three of us, we kind of work together to support our users. So as you can see, there's about 21 different hubs, which means that there's going to be 21 different facility managers and different capabilities.
Right.
But if as a user or an industry trying to solve what my pain point is or what the problem that I'm trying to solve, it can be sometimes overwhelming to access or understand who will be the right person to talk to. So our job is really to understand and scope the problem that the user is facing. And based on our understanding of which hub can best support them, we can basically put them in contact with them. But also we provide the value in terms of how best the project can be supported from a cost perspective as well, and those type of things. Because our pricing policy, again, is really transparent and it's published online, because it really depends on each hub's capabilities. So there's not a blanket pricing as such, but really to give the user the understanding. So there might be a startup with limited budget and a huge problem that's not defined yet. So we kind of help and pinpoint exactly where then they could be focusing and put them in touch with the right team to talk to. That's really what we try to do in a sense. And there's also a bit of funding opportunity within ANF, which is called ANFC, I think it's ANFC, but we don't know what the C is really to support commercialization and going beyond the TRL5s to help them understand the market need and how to launch the product and those type of things. So that's a separate conversation. So that's those sorts of information is what we provide access to and make the referral to those type of programs. And also to see if there's any external access. So sometimes we may not have the answers to all the questions. So we try to build the network and ecosystem with other national organizations, such as, let's say, Microscopy Australia or ANSTO, and those type of organizations, to see where the support can best be. And sometimes it can be equipment manufacturers or suppliers who can actually have the answers to the users' problems. So really give the users a holistic answer to where they're trying to head to with their R&D problems.
Right. So extensive capability, 21 client engagement facilities. What's your specialty?
dealing with quantum and photonics. That's because of my location in New South Wales and the speciality of these hubs that are focusing on. But I'm also not saying no to someone with a different problem. Sometimes I support businesses with energy sectors or climate sectors and those type of businesses. My colleague at Adelaide specializes in defense type of projects, and my colleague in Melbourne specializes in medtech and biotech type of projects. But again, we're not really restricted, but just to have some sort of a focus, we try to have these sector amongst ourselves. So yeah, so if anyone's really interested in the quantum sensors and quantum computing, that's something that we have ready access here. And the National Quantum Strategy has just released this morning. So it's kind of interesting times, really, to see how businesses can start being the example of using quantum technology. So because it's so early in the stage. So if you've got any questions, even about where and how you can get started, you don't need to have a clear idea. We're all learning about the quantum tech. So yeah, feel free to talk to us about that.
Yeah, and it is evolving. We see it out there more and more. So interesting times. Okay, so we have spoken for about 20 minutes, which is what I said we would do. A lot of the information for ANFF is on your website. So it's anff.org.au. So please feel free to go on there and have a look. I did mention earlier our AMEF, Advanced Manufacturing Ecosystem Fund. So that is a $7.5 million co-investment fund that we have in the Territory to support industry-led projects through that TRL commercialisation stage. So as part of that, the main applicant can be Australia-wide. The main project activity does have to occur in the Northern Territory with a Northern Territory collaboration partner, but you also have to collaborate with academia or R&D, organisations such as yourselves or CSIRO to really pull that R&D into the manufacturing production space. So information is on the AMGC website, so amgc.org.au. Please feel free to have a look. Before we finish up today, thank you, Navin. I'm just going to open the floor to questions. If you do have one and you'd like to speak, I don't see any in the Q&A area. Please pop your hand up and I will take you off mute. If you don't have a question, more than happy for you to have a conversation with Navin and have a chat with him. So we've got about 5 or so minutes left. Please, over to the floor. While we're waiting for those to come through, is there anything else that you would like to finish up with, Navin?
Nothing in particular, really. But yeah, but I was just having an afterthought because you've got the AMEF funding. Yep. And the ANFC funding, I think, because you're supporting the early stages and we're doing the later stage funding, or basically anyone who has been through the ANF ecosystem becomes eligible for the ANFC funding. Together, I think it's a really good combination for anyone who wishes to pursue a new R&D or a new product development type of projects, I guess.
Absolutely. And one thing that I've noticed as well is if they're not eligible for a particular funding, you've got a network, or I've got a network, so we can actually push or put manufacturers or industry into the right direction for some support and funding there. So doesn't look like we do have any questions, which is fine. It just allows us to leave on time. I do like to keep these really short and sharp because I know business is busy and half an hour is, I think, a really good time to have. The information you shared today was fascinating. I really do hope that some businesses get in contact to talk about how they can incorporate your services into their commercialisation development. Please head to the websites for more information, and I will share Navin's contact details if you're happy with that, Navin.
Yeah, definitely. And feel free.
Thank you for coming along today, and thank you everyone for taking the time out. And our next speaker, I'm hoping you mentioned ANSTO earlier, so we have locked in ANSTO, just trying to confirm a date, but I'll pop those details up on the website when that's all locked in. Another half an hour in conversation with hopefully ANSTO next month. So everyone have a great day.
All right. Thanks, Charmaine.
Thank you.